I basically auditioned for a phenomenal school called the Brit School. It's where Adele went, it's where Amy Winehouse went. Tom Holland, Spider-Man, he went there.
Luke McCabe. You're a show creative director who has worked with Lady Gaga, Malone, Ayra Starr, and you're here in Paris to help create one of the first concerts in the Cour Carré of the Louvre.
But at the beginning of your career, you started out as a dancer.
I would go to all of the classes, like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. I would do them all.
But you were more than a dancer. Lighting, set design, all these things interested you. And backstage, you started to notice something.
This strange, unknown figure who would walk around with like a headset on, and I'm like, who's that? Who is that?
So when you heard about the role of a show creative director, you realized
that's what I want to do.
Okay, so hi everyone. Today we are with an international guest, Luke McCabe. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Great. I'm very excited.
Good. Me too.
And so you are a show creative director, and you here in Paris for the Visa concert.
Yeah.
With Malone, Ayra Starr. So how are you feeling? Are you stressed, excited?
I'm feeling good. It's going to be good. It's called Visa Live at the Louvre. And yeah, we've got 4 artists in the Cour Carré and feeling excited. Yeah, I feel like it's going to be a good show. It's going to be good.
So can you tell us, like, how did you get the offer to work on this project?
Yeah, so the lead production agency is a company called Imagination.
Okay.
They're pretty big. They're kind of a global production agency. And I wanted to work with them for a while. And so I've been chatting with their head of production for like a couple of years now, just to seeing like when the right project would come up. And so they gave me a call towards the end of last year and said, you know, we've got this large-scale concert. We think you'd be great for it. And then they kind of brought me in and explained about the project. Met the Visa team, and then we've been working on it since February.
Okay.
So February until May. Yeah, so that's how it came about.
Okay, and so like you're here since last week?
Yeah, I arrived last Tuesday. I came a little bit earlier in the month. I work with an incredible choreographer called Kinga Holy and his company Space to Create. And we hosted a local dance audition.
Okay.
And so we were here to look at some local talent, which was really exciting. There was a lot of talent in Paris and from across Europe actually came across, which was really cool. So I was here then. And then I've been here like once before for a day trip, but this is the longest I've spent in Paris for sure, yeah.
Do you enjoy Paris?
I do. There's a lot of beautiful people in Paris. And like the cafe culture, I had a cookie croissant, which like changed my life. I never thought that would exist. And now I'm going to say goodbye to my abs because I need that in my life every day. It was great.
Is this the thing on TikTok?
Yeah.
Okay, I never tried it.
So someone told me about it and then I tried it and I was like, this is changing my life. It was insane. Yeah.
I have to give it a try.
You do. You actually do, yeah.
And so crazy. I want to know, like, for this such like a big show, like who are the people you're working with? Like, are you the only creative director working on this project, or are you working with other people to help you with the creative design and stuff like that?
Yeah, it takes a huge team for something of this scale. So there are different creative directors across different areas. So there's a lot of, so Imagination is kind of leading it, but there's a few other agencies who are involved in this project. Some of them are like running like the social channel and all the lead up stuff. So that has their own creative director from across the kind of campaign. And like, you know, sometimes when you walk into an event, there's lots of like signage and things that has its own creative director. So like it helps because there's lots of different creative directors. And then we have kind of one, what we call ECD, which is like executive creative director.
Okay.
Who is across the whole project. So he wouldn't be across minute details, but he would be across like, what's the social campaign? What's the like environmental branding? Like what's this? And then so I look after the show.
Okay.
Even with that, like, you know, we've got 4 artists as part of the lineup. They have their own like people that they often work with quite frequently, whether it be tour managers or like different artistic directors. And so it's a real collaboration. We've got to make sure that all the artists feel super comfortable. Naturally, from a brand perspective, Visa have their own input from artistic wise, you know, then you've got the agency. So there's a lot. There's kind of like 3 channels for me to kind of navigate. You've got the agency that have onboarded me and I'm working for. Then you've got Visa, who's the client. And then you've got each of the 4 artists. So there's a few different players that I respond to. And then, broadly, there's a lot of creative directors involved. But from the show side, it's me driving it with a lot of people kind of invested.
Okay, but like with all of those people, how do you manage to, put your thing and your vision for the show? Are you like talking with the artist to see like, okay, what do they want? Maybe to see with like the music that they're gonna play, like maybe, okay, I'm gonna do this and this. How do you manage to create also your own world, on the stage?
Totally. I think it totally makes sense as a question. I think my job is to help amplify other people's stories. And so I don't necessarily approach projects like this in that, like, how can I put my stamp on it? I might have when I was younger, like when I was starting out, that might have been a bit of like an intention for me. I think as you do this role, you learn that it's less and less about you and your presence in it, but that your role is to facilitate. And so it's really important that those artists feel authentic on that stage and it feels like them and it's something that they're proud of. It's equally as important from a brand perspective that Visa is prominent and that they have space on that stage and it is their stage. It's Visa live at the Louvre, not an artist live at the Louvre. And so in projects like this, it's a real collaboration about navigating everybody's kind of like wants and desires and needs that they're also warranted to have. And I think artistically, you have 4 different artists that are so different in this show. And it's like, how do you draw like a through line so that it all does make sense and there is consistency and it does feel like a coherent show? This one's a little bit unique in its essence in that we have a live audience that will be there and hopefully it will not rain. If it does, we will still have an amazing time.
Yeah.
But also later on in the night, we're going to go live on Roblox. And so, that means we open up to a wider audience. People who can't actually come to Paris are going to be there because they can kind of join online, which is super exciting. And so because of that aspect as well, you kind of need to think how, for the people watching at home, how is that consistent? Like, because they're not getting the excitement of in the space. So then how do we craft an experience that feels consistent, but also amplifies the individuality of each act. And so that's been some of the challenges. And I think it's just always good to take an open mind and open hands into kind of meetings and say, how can I help kind of craft this? And I think it's really important never to try and pigeonhole somebody or force anybody into something that they're not.
Yes.
We never get anything good out of forcing somebody to be something that they're not. So I just feel like, understanding people, doing a lot of research, like I said earlier, I work with a great guy called King of Holy. So he does a lot of choreography and I do a lot of the creative direction. And we've worked together for a couple of years on a lot of projects. And we both take a bit of a similar process in that we do a lot of research onto people. So we'll watch a lot of stuff, interviews and like music videos, even though this isn't a music video, just understanding people's like artistic inclinations, things that's natural to them, so that when we do approach things and we're offering ideas, it hopefully feels like true to what they do as a visual brand, because everybody has a brand. And I think it's understanding every aspect of that, so that when you come to the stage and they are on that stage with their performance, it's true. So, it's not necessarily me, my goal about what I want it to look like. I have an idea and I have preferences, and I have certain styles that I will lean to, which feels natural to me. And I think if you do look across my work, there is probably some similarities because it's my brain. So I'm going to always have a certain lean towards a certain style. But hopefully, if I've done my job right, it's not all looking the same, because every single artist should be able to have a flair that's true to them. And I think there's a skill in unlocking that and hearing that. And listening is a skill. And I think often people will step into a process and they'll talk. And actually, I think it's better to observe and soak things up and listen to the details, and hear what is true to them before you tell them what you think is true to them, which is so bizarre.
Yeah.
So I just feel like, listen, close your mouth, soak up the details, and then respond.
Okay.
I think there's power in listening.
Yeah. And also, I wanted to ask you, because you talk about your style also. So, can you describe a little bit what is your style, if you know even how to describe it? I don't know if I
know it, because in fact, I shared a bit of work that I did. We worked on a Spotify show last year and worked with Ray actually, and Ray I've known Ray for a few years, and so I've seen her journey, and she's like killing it, right? And she's so phenomenal. And I shared a piece of work with somebody who I've known for a very long time, and she was like, "Yeah, that looks like you." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And I was almost like not offended, but I was a bit shocked. I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "Yeah, this is definitely your work." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And so she was like, "Yeah, it's just got you all over it." And I was like, "What do you mean?" So I don't know if I'm aware of it, actively aware of it.
Yes.
But I think everybody will naturally have like a certain tone. But I think I'd struggle describing it because I think it is subconscious. I don't think I'm actively like saying this is me, so I want it to look like this.
Yes.
So I think it is there, but even as I'm thinking now, like, come on, Luke, there must be an example, and I'm like, I struggle.
Yeah, but like it's correlated with the stuff that you said about you want also to put the person like in
Exactly.
So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But, okay. And also I wanted to ask you because you told us that before you had struggle to listen to people, to like put them in the first position, but like, so how did you start in this industry? Like because I know that you have been a dancer, so you have been on stage, maybe you had to listen to creative director. So how was it, and what's your journey?
Yeah, so I mean, even before that, I was a very intense kid. Okay. So like, if I had my mind to something, I would do it 100% with a lot of intensity. And if it wasn't something I was interested in, like there was no chance I was going to look at it. Like I was like either all in or nothing, right?
I understand.
Yeah, I think my dad had hopes of dreams of me being like a footballer and golfer, and it just never worked. I was like never that guy. Bless him. He loves what I do now, so it's great.
That's great.
But no, I was pretty intense. I actually did karate first, and I think it helped me. I was very intense in that, and I was like a belt away from black belt. And what I didn't love like fighting and grappling. I loved like, we call it katas. I don't know if there's lots of probably different types, but it's like set movement. And it's almost like a dance because it's like movement memory. You do like a sequence of like physicality and like punches and kicks and stuff. And so that, I loved that. And really, when I look back, that's like dancing because it's like set sequences. And I would nail that bit. I would always really do that. Nail that.
How long did you do like karate?
I did it from like 9 until maybe like, no, it must have been earlier than that. I'm trying to figure out what ages they are. Maybe 7, maybe 7 to like 11, but I was intense. I was doing a lot. I was like all in. Anyway, my sister danced. We used to put on like little shows and stuff at school, at home. She was always a dancer, and I used to go and watch the shows and loved like all the costumes and the lights and all of that jazz. And my parents have been always incredible at taking us to shows and stuff. So I've always been around it, run around music, lots of different kinds of music. And so I used to just love the expression side. And then I started dancing at like, I think 10, 11.
Okay.
And I stopped karate because I found dance and I was like, yeah, this is my thing, not like trying to fight people. So then I started that, and I again was super intense, and my parents were super incredible and like supporting me. And I would start to kind of go down to London in the weekends and train, and then come back up and then go to school Monday to Friday, and then go back down to London and train because obviously the training in London was a lot better. I lived in the Midlands. So it's like 2.5 hours away. So like an hour and a half on the train, but 2.5 hour drive. So I would get the train by myself to go down and train at like.
And you were
really
like
young.
11?
Yeah, really young. And so there was a choreographer who used to come up and teach a class every Wednesday night. And I would go to all of the classes, like beginner, intermediate and advanced. Like I was like, I would do them all.
Yeah, you are intense.
Yeah, very intense. And I was all in, and I like got my first dance job at 14. It's like a European tour, and I was so excited. I don't know if that's legal, but it happened. My parents were like, yeah, go for it. Which is amazing.
Yes.
And so I learned a lot. I was able to do some work really young, and I was still doing my like GCSEs. And then I basically auditioned for a phenomenal school called the Brit School, which is like a free performing arts school in the UK. Okay. It's where Adele went. It's where Amy Winehouse went, Jessie J.
It's for like all the artists. You learn not only dance, but like...
There's lots of different streams. I'm still really actively involved in the Brit School. It's phenomenal. And they've got like an acting stream. So like Tom Holland, Spider-Man, he went there. Yeah, so there's lots of cool people who have been there. And then there's a lot of people who you won't know who are also incredible at what they do. So like musical directors, and there'll be like theatre directors and lighting designers that all went to this school. And so we were all there. It's free, which is insane.
Yes.
And yeah, it was really competitive to get in. And so once I got in there, I moved to London at 16.
Okay.
And then so I continued to do a bit of dance work for different artists and kind of like different brands. And yeah, I was continued to train at like 16 at Brit, and then we left at 18 and I went into the big world. And I remember it was pretty much 18, like pretty much straight out, which is ironic. Like I did all of this intensity, like 14 to 18 as a dancer, like had these insane like opportunities. And I was on stage and I just kept getting distracted by like what the lights were doing, or like why I was wearing something. Not in a rude way, like why am I wearing this? More like, you know, like what goes into this, like who's thinking about this. And I would see, because we would always work with the choreographer and, you know, work with some incredible choreographers. And then they would always be directed or kind of speak to somebody else, this strange unknown figure who would walk around with like a headset on. And I'm like, who's that? Who is that? And they were like doing all this stuff, like talking to the lighting designers, and they were talking to like looking at the screen, and then they were looking at the costumes and looking at the pyro. I was like, who is this person? And I was intense. So I was like, you know, when I was at school, I would put on shows myself. Like when I was in high school, I would direct a show, and all my teachers were like, really? Yeah, I was like mad intense. And so I'd always been fascinated by the idea of like storytelling and like building things together and seeing a larger picture. I used to write when I was a kid. I used to write stories and take it to go early to school and pull it on people's desks, and it was like my classmates had superpowers, and I love the idea of everyone getting sucked into this story and following it. So I've always been like
really creative and trying to tell stories.
Yeah, storytelling, intense, like very much like kind of making a story personal to people. And so when I learned about or understood or watched the role of a creative director, kind of like bringing a show together with a whole story, with all these different components that kind of unravel to tell something and sucked an audience in, I was like, that's what I want to do. Because I love dance, and I still find dance beautiful. I've not danced a step since I was 18, so that's a long while ago. But I have a lot of passion for dancers and what they do. And like I said earlier, I work with an incredible choreographer now, King, who is phenomenal at what he does. And so I love going into his studio and, you know, like soaking up all the energy and seeing like the incredible dancers, and I love it. But I don't miss working as a dancer at all. Because when I found creative direction, I was like, this is what I've been looking for. So yeah, I essentially found that person, and I was like, let me learn from you. And so over the years, I was able to learn from a few different kind of people and just shadow them in their process, and just watch and observe and assist, like even if it's grabbing coffee, and just kind of like watched how they navigated different things and kind of understand lots of the different like layers that go into the role.
Yes, because like, so you talk about a person that you follow.
Yeah, there was a few.
Okay,
yeah.
and so like you talk to them because like you were at the show and you were like, oh, okay, so what are you doing?
Yeah, I was just like, can I shadow you? Can I follow you? Can I watch? And they were gracious enough to say, yeah.
Okay, and so after how did you manage to do like the transition from performing to be like, okay, I have something, maybe we can do, like, how did you manage this transition?
So the role of a show creative director or show designer is essentially the person to bring in all the different mediums into one vision. And so it's for the artist or for the brand or for whoever the client is. And so you have to have like an understanding of like the different, it's almost like you've got different paintbrushes and you're a painter. And you kind of need to at least have an understanding and appreciation and awareness of the process of every paintbrush. So that's like lighting design, it might be like screen content creation, it might be like prop design, it might be costume, it might be choreography, which obviously I was aware of a lot more.
Yes.
So many other components, like just technical production and how rigging works and how it all like kind of blends together and with very intelligent people. I'm probably missing areas like glam, like hair, makeup, like costume.
This is crazy.
Like there's so many layers. And as technology advances, it's changing and morphing and growing. And it's like there's advances and there's new elements and there's, you know, like projection and waterfall curtains and all this incredible stuff that you have to kind of start to appreciate and open your mind to. And there's some incredible work in opera and in theatre and like in massive stadiums and like, or small installations that could really like you know, inspire set designs. And like, there's the whole world out there of these different mediums and they're their own craft, right? So I trained as a dancer really young and had some great experiences. But even still, like the world of choreography is like constantly evolving and this style changes. So like you can never really be
totally
aware of everything. So I had to have a base understanding so that you're not directing people or having ideas that are ignorant or not possible practically, or that could be so much more, right? But you kind of need to have a little bit of like a touch and go, like I need to kind of aware and how these things can kind of correlate together. And then the key thing really is surrounding yourself with people who are experts in their field and are really collaborative and can understand your vision and your tone and kind of like work together. Because I think it's all about finding the right people. So you kind of need a basic awareness of like what is good in that world.
Yeah, that's true.
Otherwise,
Also,
it's like you're going to bring in the wrong person.
How can you be like, okay, you're a good choreographer if you never
if
go
you
to
don't know?
show?
It's really hard for people, and I think that's what is interesting about there's so many different creative directors in the show and the music world, or show creative directors, however you want to call the role, who have different styles, and you can almost sometimes see the mediums that they really lean on heavily more than others. And I think that's what's beautiful, because we're all so different and we all bring such a lot of different styles. And I think it's interesting that some of us rely more on certain mediums than others. And there is no right and wrong with that. So yeah, I think it's really key to kind of have a base understanding and then like bring in the right teams around you. And that is really subjective. It depends on budget. It depends on what the artist is. It depends on like what your style is, what your awareness is. But what I've found is bringing in really great energy, very talented, but also good people who are collaborative and are really willing to work together is the best results. Because I might have an initial thought, an initial like direction, and a little, I'll work on a deck or a mood board or a proposal, and then I'll take it and be like, but what do you think? And like, how do you see this expanding? And I see it more of a partnership than like I'm directing you.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever get the best out of people in that way. I think it's like you're cultivating like a journey, and they can add to it, and it starts to become this tapestry of like their expertise and your vision and their vision, and it can morph and grow. And I think if you collaborate with people enough and they're trusted, like they will be willing, and you want them to be willing to give suggestions like that could work, but what about this? And sometimes it's not the right thing, but sometimes it really is, and it kind of like makes such a difference. So that's kind of the beauty of it, but it is hard work to kind of learn that and be aware of things and stay aware of it, but also know that it's not all just me. Like I don't have to be an expert in all of this. I can rely on the experts, and as long as the vision's right and true to the artist or true to the client, then I think we get there in the end. Yeah,
it is really like a little bit like an orchestra. Like
when
you
exactly.
have like all those stuff, and also you have to listen to people around you and to be like open to new ideas.
I think your orchestra analogy is so true. Like the conductor doesn't ever need to pick up the violin, but they need to be able to aware of how to guide them.
Yes.
And I think that's what is kind of like the role, to be fair.
Okay,
totally.
So can you tell us about like the first job that you had as a creative director and maybe how it went?
Yeah. It shocks people when I tell them this story, to be fair. Ever since I was coming to London a lot at like 14 and I was like training a lot, I was also involved in a church. And it was a large-scale church based in Australia, and they've got lots of different like spaces around. And my parents weren't religious growing up. They didn't go to church. They had a lot of Christian values, so a lot of the values very much made sense to me. But in terms of the attending of church and the worship side, maybe that wasn't something that was like, that's not something that my parents would do. They were never against anything. They were always like, do whatever you want to do. Encouraged everything, which is incredible. So I got involved in a church through some dancers that I knew. So they were going to the church. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And it was like really modern. It was really exciting. They utilize a lot of production and like lighting, and it was like very much crafted to be a modern message. And it's amazing what they do. And the worship music was incredible. So I got involved just because my friends were involved, and I developed my own like faith with Christian faith, and it's beautiful, and I still hold it to this day. And I think it's really important. And so I got involved in this church, and in the youth side of things, like under 18, they used to do these like youth nights. And they used to do this one like a school hall, and it was like tiny. There was like a few hundred people there, but there was just a lot of energy, right? And we were all involved, and it was fun, and we had a great friendship group. And so I got asked, because they knew that I was starting to go into like creative direction, to like pull together like what the event looks like. And as I told you, I was like, I'm intense. I was like, I will absolutely be the creative director for this youth event. And so I was like, honestly, I think the guy who asked me to do it probably regretted it instantly because he was like, oh no, we've just let, like a rhino
What
through.
did I do?
Absolutely. And so I was like, right. And it was just round when Kanye and Jay-Z released Church in the Wild. And so we basically did a fake version of like that and got like plants on the stage and like lit it up with green lights, and we did a knockoff Christian version of that song, and we had dancers and we had like a Christian rapper that changed it to be all Christian stuff. Like we went in like with what we had,
This
and we
is
were
so
like,
cool.
I found like a graphic designer who was like, I don't know, it was just some kid at the time who was like, yeah, I've just started IT at my school, and I was like, you're going to design the screens. And I was like, you need to do it by this date. And so I was very intense. Like the producer side of me came out and the director side was equally there. And so I was like, we need to do this by this point. This needs to be here. And I like probably was awful to work with because I was just probably like, you know, where early we were like, oh, do you bring in yourself? I probably did bring in a lot of ego because I was like, this is going to be my vision, you know?
Yeah, but
I was like 16.
That's normal because
Totally.
you want to do it right. So you're
course.
like, okay,
And
they
you're
ask
young.
me, so
yeah, of course.
I'm going to do
You're
it.
like, damn, yeah, I'm going to do this. And I have learned a lot since then. Anyway, but yeah, so I started doing those youth events and I loved it. And we started to build like a bit of a team of people who were just like gassed to do it, who were part of the church. It was like really, really organic. Anyway, when I got to 18 and I started to like really assist and kind of shadow some creative directors, I got approached to work for them.
Okay.
Like full time. And it was like, you know, it was a church, so like there was, the salary was like pennies, but I was just like, gas to do it. I was like, of course, it doesn't matter. I'll just figure it out. I'll just like teach some dance classes to some kids at the same time while I do this, and I'll just like make it work. And so I ended up working there for like 5-6 years. I became like one of the global creative directors eventually of the entire church, and I would kind of go around and creatively direct these 3-day conferences across arenas first in Australia and then across the world. We would design these big theatric like opening performances, and it was always based in the Bible. So like back to the storytelling thing, I used to love it. Like take an ancient message, bring it to like a modern day context. You know, again, we had no budget, but as we started to do larger things, we were able to do a little bit more. And you can do a lot with a little if you're intentional. And so yeah, it was from a creative perspective, I was just able to find my own fit, and it was like really exciting. And like I said, it was authentic and passionate for me because I held the Christian faith very strong. Like my relationship with God was very cool. So I loved it. I was very involved in the church, and I would create these big spectacles. And, you know, there was a lot of people involved. A lot of people like volunteered their time, and they did a remarkable job at throwing themselves into it. But it was intense, and it was very like, you know, very hectic for people. And so we did that. And from a creative perspective, you know, I was able to learn how to do things and be able to find my own like flow in things. And that was cool because up until then I'd only been assisting. So I did like 5-6 years there creatively. We did like big kind of carols productions at Christmas and stuff. We did some other bits. And yeah, practically it was cool. It was great. I learned a lot. And then I guess personally, as a gay man working for somewhere like that, you start to pick up on things and notice that although with my skill set, I was maybe accepted because I was making all this stuff and there was no one else making this stuff, I started to notice that other gay people maybe weren't being given the same opportunities. And so it was very evident to me that they have a welcome home on their, you know, doormat and on the screens. And yet I was noticing that welcome home wasn't being extended to people who are queer. And that bothered me. And so it got to a point where I couldn't build something that was not welcoming people like me at all. And so I left. Okay. And so ever since then, I've been working as a creative director for myself, completely freelance. And I've been building that and my kind of client base ever since. And so that was a kind of a complex role because although there was definitely the show creative side, I also picked up a lot of the more traditional creative direction of campaigns. We would do these kind of lead up campaigns and kind of post campaigns. So I would learn the art of more traditional creative direction in like advertising. And so that was interesting because no one was teaching me. There was just a gap, so I would fill it. And so since then, I've spent a lot more time in the advertising world. I did a course with a great company called D&AD, who do a shift program, who support essentially creatives who didn't go to university to to learn the more commercial side of creative direction and creativity. So they learn about advertising campaigns and like different social campaigns and lots of different more creative direction across like for different agencies or kind of like brand worlds and stuff. So you kind of just get a breadth of knowledge in that side too. And that helped me kind of take the skills I'd learned and put it in a more traditional sense from a brand side. So ever since I've been working back in music and building a bit of a team, like I said, working with people like King and a few other great people. So building work in the music field, so working directly with artists, but also in the more kind of like brand show, creative direction. So for different branded shows or different branded campaigns that incorporate anything that's theatric. So I find myself working in the kind of events, brand and music worlds now as a kind of show creative director.
Yeah, but like what is really the difference between maybe when you work with a brand or when you work with an artist or maybe the person that you're working with or the process, because maybe they want really like something, okay, we want this and this, or maybe the other side you have more freedom. I don't know. Is there a difference? Or
there is a difference. I think within music, typically you're working with the artist team, so manager. So it's in some ways it's a little bit cleaner because you're just working directly. Within the brand shows, like I mentioned earlier with the Visa one, you're working with a few different players. So you might have been brought on by a certain agency and then you're working with their team, but also you're working with their client, which is typically the brand. But then if they've got an artist, then you've also got to work with their team. So that nature of kind of lots of different components means you really do have to listen a lot and really navigate a lot. Whereas with the artist, you can kind of spend a lot more time understanding what is true to them and you can build a bit more like kind of a relationship and kind of create that. There's always going to be lots of players. You've always got production managers that you want to work with and you want to make sure that's true. There's a budget that's always you got to work with, which is never fun. Like there's just like lots of players, right? Like with artists, you might have all the label side as well. So I think you've just got to, with all of it, what's really integral is, again, like I said, you've got to listen and you can't go in with an ego because I just feel like you're going to be disappointed. You have to monitor your expectations. Like, this project, this job is not for me to articulate my vision. My vision might infiltrate in there somewhere, but it's really about their story and being able to amplify that and being able to kind of cultivate and, facilitate what is best for everyone. And then if my vision also gets sprinkled in there, then great. But if it's something that actually comes from them and I maybe just need to tidy it up and maybe make it work, that's also okay. Sometimes there's a lot of like, you'll work with some artists who are involved in every detail.
Yes.
And then, you'll work with others that might have a bit of a vision, but they might not be involved until they come to rehearsal. And so like, you kind of just need to be able to mold to whoever is kind of the client at the time. So it all depends.
Yeah, you have to be like a chameleon. Like
you do.
Yeah,
and you can't hold, like, I think the greatest thing about creatives is that we're sensitive. We're sensitive to details and that's what inspires us for certain things. But also one of the greatest weaknesses of creatives is the fact that we're sensitive because we hold things sometimes. And I think we're passionate about what we do. So we hold it and we create and it sits with us for a long time. Like, I don't know how other people think because I can't read minds. But for me, like I will sit with things and I'll take my dogs for walks and I will be thinking about things constantly. It's not a 9 to 5 and I'll be chewing things and I'll be considering things and sometimes it will lock at the strangest times and like I'm sensitive to details and that's why I'm good at what I do, but I can't hold to it and be sensitive because otherwise I'll get crushed. So if I have a vision and I'm sensitive about it and I put it on a deck and I send it over and it's just not right, I can't then be like crushed because somebody doesn't like it. If it's not right, it's not right, And so I need to be sensitive, but not too sensitive. And so it's like this weird,
this is very paradoxal.
So you just have to be really careful about where you're putting your own expectation. Like, are you getting this for some gratification for me to feel like it's mine? Like, if so, you're going to be disappointed, Like, there'll be moments where, and they're always beautiful and far and few between, to be honest, where what you see initially and what you see on the stage is the same. Those moments are beautiful, don't get me wrong. They're very rare because you have to compromise a lot, whether it be budget or differences of opinion, or like the right talent might not be available, or like whatever it might be. There might be things outside of your, I don't know, sometimes there's a comms fail. Once we were trying to do some kind of like lift thing with a dress that was meant to like go up as like sails once, and comms broke down and someone didn't hear the rigging thing. So it was all this moment where all the lights were like sweeping up and then like nothing was lifting. And it was like sick. But that wasn't anyone's fault. Like comms line went down. Like that's no human error. Like things just happen, So I think and if you hold things so like desperately and sensitively, like you're going to get crushed every time. Like you can't do that. It's just not viable long term. So I think, you need to care enough that you give your best, but not, attach yourself to it. That if they don't like it for whatever reason, like that you're crushed. Like it's just not sustainable. So yeah, I think sensitivity and listening is key, but you just got to really be careful.
Yeah, because
as an artist,
you have a lot of control, but also like it looks like you control nothing for real, and you're like, well, I'm gonna see.
Yeah, definitely, and you just have to just monitor each one.
And so, do you have some? Because I saw that you worked with different artists. So I saw that you work with Lady Gaga. I was like, damn. So like maybe do you have some story time about like those big stuff that you did, or maybe like a show that really impacted you? Or
I mean Gaga was great. I mean we worked, it was actually just out of COVID, and so we worked with her lighting designer, and so it's a guy called Leroy Bennett. And sometimes that can be tricky because if you're coming in for a certain project and there's already kind of existing creatives, you're kind of aware that their trust is already in their hands. So it's kind of like, as a creative director working with someone who's, who's already got a lighting designer, you kind of just want to be sensitive to their dynamics and their relationships. And, they can either be like, don't tell me how to do this show, I'm just going to do what I know, which is fair because they've got the relationship, or they can be collaborative. And Leroy is one of the most gracious, collaborative people I've ever met. And he is like the G. Like when I tell you, like he's worked for like Prince and like Beyonce and like insane people. He's like a phenomenal lighting designer. So in all fairness, like I'm such a lot younger and was at such a different point in my career to him. So he could have easily and quite rightfully been like, don't tell me how to do this, or like your opinion doesn't matter and I'm just going to do this, and it would have been like fair. But no, the most collaborative person, possibly one of the most collaborative, super experienced people I've ever met, and like really gracious and incredible at what he does. And listen, and there was never a time when I would come forward to him with an idea that he would be like, nah, rubbish idea. He would either be like, this might not work because just so context, she doesn't like da 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 da. And so it was just incredible to like work with him. It was kind of like a wider campaign that we were doing in with Westfield actually, and like it was celebrating her and the late Tony Bennett's kind of jazz album Love for Sale. And so it was a bit of like kicking that off, and it was out of COVID, so people would go into like a Westfield store and watch it across the world. And so it was able to kind of like, it was able to get a concert without having her here because of COVID. And so it was like really lovely, and it was like really kind of classy and quite jazzy, and it was lovely. And she's really involved in lots of details, which is like lovely to see, and also not a surprise, and is like remarkably kind. So that is always a lovely thing. So that was a lovely project for me. It was very affirming as an artist, like as a creative show creative director, to work with Leroy, and I learned a lot with him as well. And then she is just phenomenal. She's actually insane, like insanely talented. So that was definitely a highlight for sure. And then, like I said earlier, we worked with Spotify for the first time in winter just gone, and it was like the Wrapped campaign. So I don't know if you're familiar with like Spotify Wrapped, but every year at the end of the year you get kind of like, like this is your analytics and like this is who you listen to the most. Da, da, da. So they wanted to kind of take it up a notch and make it live for the first time, because it's primarily been like a digital social campaign up until this point. And so in London, we created like Spotify Wrapped Live. And so we kind of created a show that went through the year, and we kind of crafted, we took a lot of the existing kind of campaign, but integrated it into a performance. And it's never been done before. We worked in a brand new venue that had literally opened a month before. And it was just, the Spotify team are phenomenal, like phenomenal people. So I don't know who hires all of those people, but like I didn't meet one rude person, like the most phenomenal brand team I've ever met. they're incredible, super collaborative, very creative, very understood music as a scene, was very sensitive to the complexities of artists and just super considerate. And their relationship with all the artists involved is obviously incredible anyway. And so, but they put a lot of trust into me actually, and were very collaborative in the creative process in a way that was really honoring and affirming, but also like allowed me to bring kind of my flavor to it. And so again, King was involved and a bit of a wider team, and the show was dope. Like it was so good. And I think we watched it and we were like, yeah, man, this is sick. And I think because it was the first ever time, obviously, that it ever happened, there was a little bit of nervousness, right? Because like Spotify, it's not really Spotify's up until this point back, as far as I'm aware, like to do a show like this. And they were like super happy, and yeah, it was such a good show. So that was a real great moment. I think it's great doing firsts. So obviously this Louvre event as well is another first. So hopefully I'll feel the same tonight at the show. But yeah, I think doing firsts of things is really great. King and I talk a lot about, we want to create epic work, but also we want to treat people right. And so that might be obvious, but I think in a very high pressured industry, unfortunately, there are stories where people are not treated right in this industry. They're not valued and they're not paid right, and the process isn't honoring of what they need for their craft. And I think it's really important that the team that we bring on keeps that at the forefront. Make sure that they, you know, do little touches in the dressing room, make sure everyone's honored, make sure that the process is good, you know, building a rehearsal schedule around what is actually best for every area to get the best out of them and not just dictating what it is. And that might sound really obvious, but unfortunately from experience, it's not. And so I think the treating people right thing is actually having to be at the foreground, because, you know, we get off jobs and people are like, that's the best I've ever been treated on a job before, which is a dope feeling, but it was also a bit of a shock to me because I'm like, really? Like, this is base level, you know? Like, we're not buying people like flowers and chocolates and like showering them with praise. Like, we're saying thank you. Like, we're saying like, you know, we want the dressing rooms to be a nice space. Like, we're doing a thank you card. Like, thank you. You know, this project wouldn't be the same without you, which is true. Like, it wouldn't be. And so it's become a bit of our ethos actually on projects. Like, how can we really make this an incredible experience for everyone involved with what's in our hand? Some things are always outside of your hands. Yes. But I think from my integrity perspective, I'm like, I want to bring my best artistically, and I want to bring my best from a people experience perspective. And then if I do that, then I'm happy, you know, and I can always get better at things and I can always improve. And I'm the first person to be like, yeah, like, tell me how this could be better. I'll always do a debrief. But I think Spotify was a time where you could see that in the process. I think when everyone's treated respectfully and they're honored and we cultivate it around people, it doesn't just bring out the best in like an experience, but it brings out the best in the art as well. And I think we saw it, that everyone was just thriving and soaring on that stage, and the artists felt comfortable. And yet from a Spotify Wrapped perspective, it was all coherent with the branding. So it was like, it wasn't forced. It could easily have been forced.
Yes.
But I think everyone took a collaborative approach, everyone listened, and we were able to create a show that felt true for everyone, which was great.
Damn, that makes me want to look at the show.
You can find it, it's online.
And also I wanted to know, because like, I guess that there was like amazing experience, but in those industry, I know that, you know, very like little details can be complicated to manage. Like, did you have maybe an example of a time and you were, oh my God, how are we gonna manage to do this? But like, maybe you succeed, or I don't know.
I'm trying to think of like an example. There's many, that's the issue. And usually I try and like bury these things back into the recesses of my mind so I don't actually have to think about the trauma. There's many. I mean, the sales was one earlier. Like, when the sales didn't go up, I was watching it like, are you mad? And you just, I think when I was younger, I used to be a little bit more like directive, and I felt like I had to be like, go in there really strong. As I've got older, I've taken a way more observant approach, and I actually find that the less you speak, the more value you have when you do speak. So I've found to just hold my tongue and wait and cultivate and allow other people the space, so that when I do kind of make a decision, there's a little bit more power behind it, in that like only talking when it actually is necessary. I think I've found and observed that a lot of people sometimes are quite reactive and quite flappy and like it comes from the best place, like they want to fix things.
Yeah.
But I think that intensity is like, that energy is very contagious, and it just builds tension, and everyone's just like this. And then no one brings out the best when they're like that. Like you can't problem solve when you're like that, because you're just like tense and it's all just very extreme. So I found it's best to take a step back and breathe, listen, and kind of just like take a beat, and then figure out what the best thing is to do, and like keep it direct, like keep it clipped, and like make sure that we're moving forward. We're not wallowing in pity and not wallowing in frustration or annoyance, because that's actually not constructive. But just holding space and just like finding an answer and staying calm. When I was younger, I think my nature is I like to be in control of details. And that's why I think I'm okay at what I do. But also you can't control everything. So you have to find a balance again of like, I'm going to hold this, I'm going to be really prescriptive about this. But there's other elements that I can't hold onto or try to, because I'm just going to like go insane, right?
Yeah.
So I think in those scenarios, you have to just learn to just let go and just trust that it will all come together. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't. And I feel like you just have to learn from things like, what can I do better, and what can other people do better? And I think that's the beauty of building a bit of a consistent team around you that you constantly collaborate with a lot, because not only do you build trust and loyalty and like you can rely on them, but like you can kind of grow together, and like, this process didn't work well on this like on the last show, so on the next one, let's make sure we integrate this step and make sure these people are here by this time, and you can just build,
Yeah.
But in terms of an example, my gosh, I don't know. Sometimes what probably doesn't seem like a big deal to other people, like, is sometimes quite a catastrophic deal. Like if you pull something that was meant to transition something else, like it kind of pulls out the skeleton of something, and then and it's a little bit minute detail, so it's kind of hard to. I've not had any like major like train wrecks. Like no one's ever been hurt.
Yeah.
No one's ever like, like I've never had a show stop or like we have to stop. Thank God. Like touch wood. Praise Jesus. Like my goodness, I never want that to happen. So yeah, so far I feel like I've been good. I'm sure other people have got crazier stories than me. I just think it's like art is relative and it's subjective. So like what I think is good, other people might not think is good, and it's all really, really, really subjective. There's no right and wrong really.
Yeah.
There's craft, like there's design principles. But there's no kind of right and wrong, really. Like, so sometimes it's kind of like, cool, that's what you think, that's what we'll do. Do I agree? Not always. But like, is it my job to agree with everybody? Not really. My job is to create a great show. And if that means create a great show, which the artist thinks is a great show, then I'll do my responsibility to kind of be like, I think this could be like this, or this could be a lot better, or what do you think about this? Or these are the repercussions that could happen with that decision. But at the end of the day, it's their name at the end of the show. Like they have to be able to be comfortable with the decisions that they make. And it's my job to facilitate and articulate what those decisions will entail and the other solutions that we could do. I'm not going to fight them about the decisions that they make, like
like with your karate skills.
Of course. Yeah, no, like, I don't think a 70-year-old karate skill is going to serve me much good at this point. So yeah, I think you just got to roll with the punches sometimes. And I think luckily, there's not been anything that's like awful that's happened. Oh, goodness. The fact that we're on show day is actually really worrying that I'm saying this. So I hope that we'll be fine. We will be fine.
So I wanted to ask you also, do you have other projects that you are working on, or like do you see in the future?
Yeah, there's a few bits coming up. So they've not been announced yet, but we've started to work on them, which is cool. And then I have been working on like a personal kind of short film for like a long time. Similar to what we were talking about earlier with kind of like the church side and like the sexuality side. It took me a long time to kind of come to terms with my queerness. And so when I was in therapy for a lot of things, I began to write just like I used to as a kid, but kind of more cathartic, kind of like getting stuff out. And from that, I was realizing a lot of things that a lot goes into our identity and our acceptance of identity within society. And there's lots of things, whether it be like labels that we get like labeled from a young age, or like certain roles and masks that we feel like we have to wear and we have to like live up to, even though sometimes inside it, there's a bit of a disconnect, you know, this whole obsession on social media to be liked by people that we don't know, but we don't even like ourselves. Like there's so many layers of stuff that is in society at the moment, and relationships and how they affect you from a young age. And I kind of, you know, a lot of people like over the years would say certain things to me in the church and out of the church about my sexuality, and it all kind of like built up in my head about my relationship with my queerness. And so whilst I was through therapy, I started to write a lot of things as I was like really diving into the appreciation for who I am. And I was realizing that although it was kind of part of my story, it's also really relevant to other people. And so the journey of accepting who you are there's actually principles for a lot of people, even if it might not be queerness for other people, it might be something else for someone else, you know, like, and I think I was kind of inspired. So I've actually worked with some artists, and they've written songs just for this project, and it's like it's a 20-minute film, and we're going to release it in October. And so it's kind of like, I turned 30 in October, so it's kind of like the end of my 20s and looking back at the start of my 20s and a bit of a journey. And it's really metaphoric. It's completely self-funded. There's no production company. It's like me and some friends. Some of them have like really just given their time for free, which is I'm super grateful for it. They've just believed in it. And yeah, we've built this like 20-minute 6-song film. And it's like very metaphoric. Every visual looks very different. It's called Thorn. And it's a bit of a play on like a Bible scripture. I was told in the church that because Paul had a thorn in his side, and you know, if you pray, like God can get you through it. And I was often told that, you know, my sexuality was like a thorn in my side. If I prayed, then my gay would go away. So we're exploring that whole idea of what the thorn is. And so, yeah, it's coming out in October, and I'm super excited by it. So that's what we're working on at the moment, in the back burner, in addition to all the other shows. So yeah, I've never done a film before. I've never done a personal project before. So this will be the first time. It is actually my story, and it is my soul work with no other anyone else telling me what it will be. So it's actually exciting. It's also very, 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 very vulnerable, you know, and very personal. And usually it's someone else's story and someone else's brand. And like, I'm a show creative director doing a film. It's quite random, but it felt right. It's very personal. It's kind of nice to wrap it up with my 30th birthday. So we're doing it in October, which is fun.
And like, do you play in the short film, or is
I am in the short film? Yeah.
Yeah, you are like, are you playing like your story and?
I'm in bits. Yeah, I'm in little moments, and then the artists are in there. There's some other like kind of like talent in there. There's some dancers, there's props, there's like set design, there's lighting. You know, there's all the theatric things. You know, of course. It wouldn't be me without that. But I am actually in the film, and I was really unsure about it because I enjoy being behind like the camera, not in front these days. But it felt like the authentic thing to do. I also didn't have a budget to hire someone to be me, so it was actually sometimes practical. Yeah, it's probably one of the moments I'm a bit like but I think it feels right. Like when I watch it, it's like it's actually my story. It's true, you know. So yeah, I am in moments. Yeah.
Okay, and where could we watch it? Where is it?
Yeah, we're figuring that out. We're definitely going to do an in-person screening, and we're going to invite some people. We're going to like ticket it out, maybe a day in October, maybe 2 days, and then we'll see. I think we'll probably do some online releases maybe next year, maybe in Pride Month. So in June next year potentially, but I think we'd like to do a few in-person stuff before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Damn, that seems nice. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
And so what can we wish for you in the future? Like what do you see you in like few years? Do you would like to do other stuff like this? Like maybe to work more on like short film or stuff like that? Or maybe do you have like a dream artist that you would like to work with?
Ironically, with the film side, I actually never direct films or videos ever in my life. Like I never do it. And when I think and hear music, I see it on a stage. Now, naturally, when we do TV performances, like we build something, we build a performance on stage, but we have to think through the lens to capture it for TV performances. So that's probably the closest I get to like video and film direction. Like one of my closest friends is an incredible music video director. but also does like short films and does like is going into more like narrative-y TV stuff. A guy called Edamornu, who is phenomenal and has been actually really integral throughout this film, because I'm like, bro, like how do I do this? Because like my brain just doesn't think like that. And he is like, he's seen the journey that I've been on personally, so he's been really invested, which has been beautiful. But you know, I look at what he does and I'm like, I could never do that because my brain doesn't work like that. So I actually think, ironically, I'm doing one short film and like, that's it. Peace out.
Thank you. Bye.
And maybe if I could do a show, I would, but that's like really hard to do. And I think a bit intense and, you know, so I think a film made sense because you can kind of stagger it. We've been building this film for like 6 years, you know.
Damn.
Yeah, it's been slow and steady because it's been self-funded. So I can't like just throw, it's not a production company, you know. So yeah, this will be the one and only short film, I believe. I mean, I don't want to like burn any bridges, but unless it develops and someone wants to take it further, like I think it will be what it will be. It's kind of like cathartic therapy, like artist therapy, and then it's done. You know, that's what I feel like that is. And I'm proud of it, and I think it's beautiful and it feels true, and I want to get it out and it feel right. But yeah, I don't probably see myself doing another one. And then in the future about artists, like, listen, I've worked with such a range of artists that I would have never been like, yeah, I want to work on that or want to work on this song. And often the ones that you first get, and King and I sometimes look at each other like, what on earth are we going to do with this? Often end up being the best. It's really interesting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you're really pushed creatively and you have to really think outside of your normal reactions. And actually that's got probably, I'm not going to say what they are because I don't want, you know, to upset anyone if they think, why, you didn't like my song when you first said it?
No problem.
But
no problem.
like that often is sometimes the things, and we speak about this quite a bit, like that we look back on like, wow, we're actually the most proud of this, which is really, we wouldn't have said that. So I don't want to be like, I want to work with this artist. I will say probably the main reason why I started to even be attentive to details on stage is because of Beyonce Knowles or Beyonce Carter. Beyonce is my queen after my mum. My mum is my queen, and then it's Beyonce quite after that, right? Beyonce is phenomenal. She is like, you know, I made my boyfriend come with me to watch her show, and I was like, you're about to watch a masterclass of how to put a show together. I hope you realize what you're about to witness. And he was like, all right. And then afterwards he was like, okay, I get it, you know? So I do feel like, would I want to work with Beyonce? I will never say no. Whatever Beyonce tells me to do, I would do. But I think that would be the only time I get nervous, I think, to meet somebody. Because in my head, I'm like, she's like the reference point. I love her so much. But there's so many other incredible artists that are like doing incredible things, like Billie Eilish. Like imagine working with Billie Eilish, right? Crazy. But there's so many. We'd be here all day. Doja Cat, also dope. So like there's so many incredible artists that have already got so many incredible teams doing dope stuff, you know? So it's kind of like, I enjoy watching what they're doing. I think we always want to work with people who are like really open-minded, like as much as people are involved in the process, I actually enjoy it. Some people probably would find it annoying because it's like having someone over your back, but I love it because it's like, this is going to be real, you know? We started working with an incredible artist called Odile. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but you need to check him out because he is phenomenal. He's a star. And working with him, we worked on his show last year, and that was lovely because he is just dope. And his music is a vibe, and he's insane. So that was great. So I don't really have like a hit list. I think I would maybe be really scared if Beyonce ever. Yeah, she is just epic. And everyone else, I'm down, like, you know, and even like there's certain brands that I'm like, why would they do a show? And then like, I never thought Visa would do a show. So the fact that they're now doing a show at the Louvre, like I'm like, I kind of can't now be like, this is who I want to work with because it's so random and it's so fun, you know, like I've loved working on this show. So, I just see myself continuing to work directly with artists and build a bit of a relationship, kind of like build trust so that they know I can be their guy and we can create like a great team around them. I just feel really blessed to be doing what I'm doing. It's been quite a journey up to this point.
Yeah.
So I just love what I'm doing at the moment and I feel really grateful for it and I don't take any day for granted. And so if we can continue doing this kind of stuff and this keeps coming up, I will feel like a very blessed man. So I can't complain. For sure.
Damn, like I can see that you're really passionate about what you're doing, and this is crazy to see like people really I don't know, like find their own way of doing things. And so like thank you very much for being here.
No, thanks for having me.
Like it was so much interesting to discover also like this work that I didn't even knew about. Like I knew that there was someone like
you just
like
don't know
you
who
said,
they are, right?
but like you didn't even know like how they're making this.
Totally.
So this was so much interesting, and thank you for everything.
No, pleasure. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And if you're interested in dance, check out the video with Kevin, a French dancer and videographer. They talk about dance in France and abroad. The video is in French. See you in the next video.